Hello and welcome to Chemistry Sensei. This is Shane speaking. Today we will be going through 2016 CHIJ Katong End of Year Paper 1. Before you begin, it will be good that you practice these questions by yourself beforehand before you look through the video. If not, let us begin. For question 1, the rate of diffusion of soluble substances X with the MR of 59.5 and Y with the MR of 160 in water at 25 degrees Celsius and 50 degrees Celsius were compared. Which substance would have the fastest rate of diffusion? So when the question is asking you for the rate of diffusion, they are basically asking who has the fastest speed. Okay? Alright. When we want to look at speed, some of you who have learned physics may have come across this formula where Ke equals to half mv squared, where Ke is the kinetic energy, m is the mass, and v is the velocity. Alright. For simplicity's sake, we will treat velocity as the speed for this question. Okay. So when the temperature is high, alright, when the temperature is high, there will be more heat energy available. Alright, more heat energy available or thermal energy. Alright, that some of you might know. Alright. So when there's more heat energy available, more of this energy can be converted to kinetic energy based on the principle of conservation of energy. Okay? So straight away we know that 25 degrees Celsius cannot be the answer because there is less thermal energy and thus less kinetic energy available. Alright, so A and C cannot be the answer. Okay, so the higher the kinetic energy you have, the more velocity the substance will be moving. Alright, so with higher velocity, the faster the rate of diffusion. Conversely, the lower the kinetic energy, the slower the substance is moving, and hence the slower the rate of diffusion. Alright, so let us take a look at mass. Alright, with the same kinetic energy, right, with the same kinetic energy, the heavier the substance, the slower it travels. Alright, so this makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look at the reason why. So we have a small particle X and a large particle Y. Alright, when you provide them with the same energy, X can move further. Alright, on the other hand, when you provide Y with the same amount of energy, it moves lesser. Alright, and this is due to the concept of inertia. It is reluctant to move as compared to the smaller X. Alright, and with that, we know that option B is the correct answer. Alright, because it has the smaller mass with higher temperature. Okay, let us move on to question 2. A student measured the rate of reaction between calcium carbonate and hydrochloric acid. So this is your acid and carbonate reaction. Alright, in this reaction, carbon dioxide is produced. Okay, so a graph showing the volume of gas produced, which is the carbon dioxide, against time. Okay, so we are measuring the volume of the gas. Alright, volume of the gas and time. Okay, which apparatus were used to measure them. Okay, so we cannot use a burette and a pipette to measure gas, so straight away A is wrong. Okay, we cannot, so same thing, D is also wrong. Alright, so for time, the apparatus we use is the stopwatch, and therefore the answer is B. Okay, we use a gas syringe to measure the gas, stopwatch to measure the time. Okay, let's take a look at question 3. The diagram shows 3 methods of collecting gases. Okay, so this is the upward delivery method. This is the downward delivery method. And this method is used for collecting insoluble gases. Okay, ammonia is highly soluble in water. So straight away we know that option 3 cannot be the answer because ammonia will dissolve in water. Alright, so it will not be collected over here. Straight away option C is incorrect. Okay, so ammonia is highly soluble in water and has a low density. So if it has a low density, it will be situated above air. Alright, so this is air, so ammonia will be floating above air. So for more denser gaseous substances, okay, they will be over here. Alright, so denser gases. Alright, so over here is the less denser gases. Okay, so we cannot use downward delivery to obtain the ammonia gas because it will be able to escape. Alright, so the only way we can collect ammonia gas is through the upward delivery, option 1. Alright, so the answer for question 3 will be A. Okay, let's move on to question 4. The boiling point of solid X is 948 degrees Celsius, is soluble in water. What is most likely boiling point of water if it contains a small quantity of X? Okay, so there is impurity present in water. So when you introduce impurity, alright, the boiling point actually increases. So let's take a look at the reason why this is such a case. Alright, so we have water over here, and we have the impurity. Alright, hold on, with the impurity X over here. Okay, so boiling point, for boiling we are changing the liquid state to gaseous state, alright, through boiling. Okay, so when we heat up water, it will change into water vapor. Okay, but with the presence of impurity, they prevent water molecule from forming vapor. So because of that, more energy is required to convert the water into water vapor, and because of that, the boiling point increases slightly. Okay, so the best answer would be option B. Okay, for option C and D, they are incorrect because you do not need such a high temperature to convert water into water vapor. Okay, option A is wrong because the boiling point increases instead of decreases. Alright, let's move to question 5. Which set of substance contain an element, a compound, and a mixture? Alright, an element is a pure substance. Alright, they can be found in the periodic table. For compounds, compounds are elements that are chemically combined. Okay, for mixture, they are elements and or compounds that are physically mixed together. Alright, so I want you to pay attention to this word, chemically combined and physically mixed. Alright, okay, so let's take a look at option A. We have carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a compound, CO2. Steel is an alloy of iron. This is a mixture. Graphite. Graphite is an allotrope of carbon, so it is an element. Alright, so technically option A is the answer. Let's take a look at option B. Dry air. Air is a mixture. We have various kind of gases in air. Tap water. Tap water is also a mixture. Alright, so we have pure water and also other ions such as fluoride and chloride present in tap water. Okay, for petrol, petrol is a mixture also, because petrol contains various amounts of hydrocarbon. Alright, ethanol. Ethanol is a alcohol, is a compound. Crude oil is a mixture, and steel is also a mixture. Alright, lastly, iodine is an element. Copper similarly is also an element. Ice, which is water, is a compound. Alright, so B, C and D cannot be the answer. Okay, let's move on to question 6. Some brown powder is placed in a test tube. Alright, so we have the test tube over here. We have brown powder in it. Okay, after water is added, alright, so we add water in, so we have water plus brown powder over here. Okay, it's shaken and the contents are filtered. So when we are doing filtration, we have the filter. We have the filter funnel, alright, and a flask to collect the filtrate. Alright, so the substance collected at the filter funnel are called the residue. Alright, the substance collected in the flask is called the filtrate. Okay, so we are taking this content in the test tube and undergo filtration. Okay, alright, so the test tube is shaken and the contents are filtered. A black solid is left in the filter paper. Alright, so the black solid is the residue. Alright, then in the filtrate there will be water, and after evaporating the filtrate, orange crystals are left behind, so there is orange crystal and water present in the filtrate. Okay, so are we able to tell that black solid is an element? No, we are unable to tell if the black solid is an element. Okay, the brown powder is a compound. Okay, the brown powder is not a compound. the brown powder is actually a mixture. Why? Because this black solid over here and the orange crystal over here actually comes from the brown powder. Okay, so the brown powder contains the black solid and the orange crystal. Alright, so the answer for question 6 is actually option C. Alright, let's move on to question 7. Okay, the diagram shows the structures of the atoms of two elements P and Q. Alright, so when we have such a structure, the first thing I'll look at is the valence shell. The valence shell for P has only one electron. So we can conclude that P comes from group 1. Okay, and it would form the cation P plus by removing one electron to achieve stable electronic configuration. Okay, for Q we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons in the valence shell. Hence, it would achieve 2 electrons to have the stable electronic configuration of an octet. Okay, so it will gain 2 electrons, so it will have the charge of 2 minus. Okay, so this is in group 6. Alright, what is the relative molecular mass of the compound formed when these two elements combine? Alright, so we have P plus, we have Q, 2 minus, so we will do the crisscross method. Alright, so we do the crisscross method and we will have P 2 Q 1. Alright, so we have the P2Q. Okay, so the MR of P2Q is equals to the sum of the relative atomic mass of the elements. Alright, so we have 2P and 1Q. Okay, so we have, what is the relative atomic mass of the atom P, which is basically the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Okay, for Q we have 8 as the number of proton and 8 as the number of neutron. Alright, so mass number is equal to the number of proton plus the number of neutrons. Alright, so you must know this before you can proceed with the question. Alright, so if we press our calculator, we would have the answer 62. And the answer for question 7 is D. Okay, let's move on to question 8. Antimony oxide has the formula Sb2O3, while sodium phosphate has the formula Na3PO4. What is the formula of antimony phosphate? Alright, phosphate. Right. Okay, let's take a look at antimony oxide first. We have Sb2O3. So remember we did the crisscross method in the previous question over here to find the compound. Alright, so similarly we'll do the reverse crisscross method, and we realize that Sb has a charge of 3 plus. Okay, and O, because it's in group 6, it has a charge of 2 minus. Alright, okay, for Na3PO4, okay, so PO4 is the phosphate ion, so we group them together. Alright, so when we do the reverse crisscross, we will have Na plus. This makes sense because sodium is in group 1, we will form the cation of Na plus. Alright, and we have PO4 3 minus. Alright, next, what is the formula for antimony phosphate? So we have Sb3 plus. For antimony phosphate, we have PO4 3 minus. Okay, PO4 3 minus. Okay, when we do the crisscross method, we will get Sb3 PO4 3, and we can simplify this to SbPO4. Thus, the answer is option A. Okay, we can simplify from Sb3PO43 to SbPO4 by removing 3 from the chemical formula. Okay, for question 10. The elements L, M, and N in the periodic table have consecutive increasing atomic number. This implies that they are side by side. Alright. Element N is a noble gas. So that means N is from group 8. So this must mean that M is from group 7. And similarly, L is from group 6. Okay. The element N is a noble gas, which is the symbol for the ion of element L. Alright, so we have established that L is from group 6. It would gain 2 electrons. Alright, it will gain 2 electrons to form L2 minus. Alright, why it will want to gain 2 electrons? As we have discussed earlier in question 7, elements from group 6 will gain 2 electrons to achieve the stable octet structure. It would want to have 8 electrons in the outermost shell. Alright, so the answer for question 9 is option D. Okay, let's move on to question 10. The diagram shows the structure of a molecule over here. How many valence electrons of the atoms are not used in covalent bonding? Okay, let's start from the left. We have chlorine. Alright, chlorine is from group 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, it would share 1 electron with carbon. Alright, so you share 1 electron with carbon to have 8 electrons in its outer shell. Okay, for carbon is from group 4. It must have 4 electrons in its valence shell. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, it will need 4 more electrons from other atoms. Okay, so we have 1 electron each from the hydrogen at the top and the bottom. Okay, let's take a look at hydrogen. Hydrogen only has 1 electron in its outermost shell. It would require 1 electron to have the stable duplet structure. Hence, it has 0 electrons that are not bonding. They are non-bonding. Alright. Okay, so let's move on. We have another carbon over here. It should have 4 electrons in its outermost shell. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it has received 2 electrons from oxygen at the top. So we have oxygen at the top. We have 2 electrons used from the oxygen atom for covalent bonding with the carbon atom. Alright. And it has received 1 electron from the nitrogen. Okay, I think we redraw this. Alright. Okay, we have carbon here and nitrogen over here. Alright. So nitrogen is in group 5. You have 5 electrons in the outermost shell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright. You share 1 electron with hydrogen over here and 1 electron from hydrogen over here. Okay. So as you can see, all the electrons except for the 2 electrons over here are bonding. Alright, so we have 2 here. Alright. Okay, so let us move on to back to high oxygen here. Okay, so oxygen is from group 6. It has 6 electrons in its valence shell. We have already drawn 2 here. 1, 2, we have 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so oxygen has 2 electrons that are non-bonding and another 2 over here. So total it has 4 non-bonding electrons. Okay, let us move on back to chlorine. If you remember, we have established that it has 6 electrons that are non-bonding. Alright, so the final answer is 6 plus 2, 8 plus 2, 10 plus another 2 is 12. So the answer for question 10 is option D. Okay, let's move on to question 11. Element X reacts with dilute hydrochloric acid to form a salt and hydrogen gas. Alright, so this is actually a acid plus metal reaction to produce salt and hydrogen gas. Alright, because we have established that X is a metal, it must have metallic bonding. Okay, and since salt is formed, salt is another name for ionic compound. Alright, so the only correct answer for this question is option D. Okay, for question 12, what is the number of aluminium ions Al3 plus present in 0.3 mole of aluminium oxide? Okay, so aluminium oxide actually has 2 aluminium ions present. How do I know that? Because it is Al2. Alright, so when we have 1 mole has 6 times 10 to the power 23 particles. Alright, this is your Avogadro's constant. When we have 0.3 mole, alright, so we times 0.3 on the left hand side, we must times 0.3 on the right hand side. So it is 0.3 times 6 times 10 to the power of 23 particles. Alright, so this is 0.3 mole of aluminium oxide. Okay, because if we use 0.3 mole, maybe let me change another color. When we have 0.3 mole of aluminium oxide, we have 0.6 aluminium ion. Alright, because there are 2 times of aluminium ion in aluminium oxide. And with that, we have 0.6 mole of aluminium ion. So the final answer is 2 times 0.3 times 6 times 10 to the power 23. Alright, if you press your calculator correctly, you will have 3.6 times 10 to the power of 23 particles. Alright, so the answer for question 12 is option B. Okay, for question 13. The table gives information about 3 indicators. We have Congo red, phenolphthalein, and thymo blue. Okay, which set of colors would be obtained when each indicator was added separately to distilled water? Alright, so we know that water is neutral. It has the pH of 7. Alright, so from Congo red, because we have passed pH 5, alright, we have passed pH 5, it will have the color red. Okay, for phenolphthalein, we have not passed the pH 10, because pH 7 is over here. You must have colorless color. Alright, okay, lastly for thymo blue, pH 7 is over here. It has passed pH 3, so the color would be yellow. Alright, so for Congo red, it is red. Phenolphthalein is colorless, as we have established. For thymo blue is yellow. So the correct answer is option D. Okay, let's move on to question 14. The pH of aqueous solution of hydrochloric acid is 12. What will be the pH of the acid after addition of sodium chloride? Alright, sodium chloride is NaCl. This is an ionic compound, which is also known as a salt. Alright, so we have learned 3 kinds of reaction for acid, which is acid plus metal, acid plus carbonate, and acid plus alkali or base. Alright, none of these are salt, so there would not be any chemical reaction, thus the pH would be still at 2. Okay, so actually salts are neutral. They have a pH of 7. They will not react with acid, so the pH will not change. Okay, next let's take a look at question 15. Which pair of salts can be prepared using the same method? Okay, so one way to check for similar salt preparation method is by looking at their solubility. Okay, let's take a look at option B first, barium sulfate. Okay, from the solubility table, which you need to memorize. Okay, barium sulfate. Where is sulfate? Sulfate is over here. We have barium sulfate. Barium sulfate is insoluble. Okay, barium chloride. Chloride over here. It does not say that barium is insoluble. Thus, barium chloride should be soluble. Okay, all nitrates are soluble, so calcium nitrate is soluble. Copper 2 chloride. Chloride is over here. Okay, so chloride, copper chloride is actually also soluble. Alright, next, lead 2 chloride and zinc sulfate. Lead 2 chloride, okay, lead is over here, so lead must be insoluble. For zinc sulfate, okay, because zinc is not shown over here, it must be soluble. Alright. How about option A? Aluminium sulfate. Alright. All aluminium are present. Aluminium is not shown over here, so it must be soluble. Similarly, for ammonium sulfate, it is not present in here, so it must be soluble. Alright. So option B cannot be the answer, as well as option D, because one salt is soluble, the other is insoluble. Alright. So that leaves us with option A and option C, because we are using nitrate over here and chloride over here, but for the option A, we are using sulfate and sulfate, which come from sulfuric acid. Alright. Let's move on to question 16. The equation shows the reaction between XOH2 and sulfuric acid. So this is a base, this is a acid. So this is a acid-base reaction to produce salt and water. Okay. So let's take a look at the base first. We have XOH2. If we reverse the crisscross, we would have this X2 plus and OH minus. So this suggests that the element X comes from group 2. Alright. Or it can also be from transition element. It can be a transition element, because transition elements can also lose 2 electrons to form the charge of 2 plus. Okay, so barium, calcium, magnesium are group 2 elements. They can form the charge of plus 2. And lead is a transition metal. It can also form the charge of 2 plus. Okay, so this information is not very useful for this particular question. Alright. So what can we deduce? What else can we deduce? Is by looking at the state of the salt. Alright. So the salt form is soluble. Alright. Sulfate. Soluble sulfate. Alright. Let's take a look at the solubility table. We know that barium sulfate is insoluble, so barium cannot be the answer. Similarly, calcium is also insoluble, so it cannot be the answer. And over here, lead can also not be the answer. Alright, because these three forms insoluble sulfate. The only correct answer is option D. Okay, question 17. Which statement explains why aluminium is a better conductor of electricity than magnesium? Alright, so for you to be able to conduct electricity, alright, we need to have something called mobile charge carrier. Alright, okay, maybe I write the word more clearly. Alright, so mobile means it can move, charge means it must be a charged particle for it to be able to carry electricity. Alright, so for metals, the mobile charge carrier for metals are the electrons. Alright, so let's take a look at aluminium. Aluminium is from group 3. It can form Al3 plus, 3 plus, and 3 electrons. Okay, magnesium is from group 2. It will offload 2 electrons to form Mg2+. Okay, so just by looking at these two equations, we know that there are more number of electrons in aluminium. Alright, more electron in aluminium than magnesium. So because of that, there is more mobile charge carrier present in aluminium. So aluminium is a better conductor of electricity. Okay, so let's take a look at the options. Option A, aluminium has a higher density than magnesium. Density is not really related to electricity. Same for melting point. Alright, how about option D? It has more mobile ions. Alright, so actually the ions are not the ones carrying the electricity, so option D cannot be the answer. Option C, there is more free electrons than the same number of magnesium atom, so the correct answer is C. Alright, for question 18, X, Y, and Z are metals. Red hot carbon will reduce the oxides of X and Y, but not the oxide of Z. Metal Y can remove the oxygen from oxide of X. Which option shows the increasing reactivity of the three metals? Alright, so let's take a look at the question again. We have carbon. Carbon would reduce the oxides of X and Y. This means carbon can react with oxygen, is preferentially reacted with oxygen than X and Y to form carbon oxide. Alright, to form carbon oxide. Okay, so that means carbon is more reactive than X and Y. Alright, because carbon would want to form carbon oxide more than X and Y, where X can form X oxide and Y can form Y oxide. Alright, so this is more reactive. Okay, but not the oxide of Z. That means Z would want to react with oxygen more strongly than carbon. So Z is actually more reactive than carbon. Okay, next, the next sentence tells us that the metal Y can remove oxygen from the oxide of metal X. This suggests that Y would want to react with oxygen more than X. Alright, so we have the reactivity of these three metals shown over here. Alright, so the correct answer is option A, where X is the least reactive, followed by Y and Z. Okay, let us move on to question 19. L, M, and N are three elements found in the third period of the periodic table. The properties of their oxides are shown. Okay, oxide of L forms a salt with aqueous sodium hydroxide. So it can react with a base. That means it must be an acidic oxide. Okay, oxide of M is soluble in acid but insoluble in base. That means it can react with acid, so it must be a basic oxide. Okay, lastly, oxide of N is soluble in acid and base. That means it can react with both acid and alkali. It must be an amphoteric oxide. Okay, so if you haven't realized already, these descriptions are talking about acid plus base reaction. Alright, if you are acid, you must be able to react with a base. Okay, conversely, if you are a base, you must be able to react with an acid. Alright, okay, which option shows the correct decreasing protons for the three elements. Okay, so if we take a look at the periodic table over here, usually the metals are basic oxide. Alright, the one at the center are amphoteric, and lastly the non-metals are usually the acidic oxide. Okay, so acidic oxide would have the largest proton number because proton number increases across the period. Increasing proton number. Alright, so the acidic oxide would be the highest, will have the highest proton number, followed by amphoteric, and lastly basic oxide will have the least proton number. Alright, so the first one would be acidic oxide, which is oxide L, so C and D cannot be the answer, followed by amphoteric, which is N, then lastly basic, which is L. So the correct option is option B. Okay, let's take a look at the last question for today. A new element with the chemical symbol JJ has been discovered. An atom of JJ has 7 valence electrons. That means it must be from group 7. Okay, they're also known as your halogens. Alright, which statement best describes the property of JJ? It conducts electricity. Straight away, option 1 is incorrect because JJ is a non-metal. Only metals conduct electricity. Alright, it exists as a diatomic molecule. Yes, group 7 tends to exist as diatomic molecule. That's why you have your Cl2, F2, Br2, etc. Alright, next, it forms a positive ion. Wrong. Alright, group 7 elements tend to gain electron to form an ion. Alright, which is your negatively charged ions. Okay, so option 3 is incorrect. So 1 and 3 are wrong. So straight away, option A is wrong, option D is wrong, as well as option B. Okay, and the correct answer is option C. Okay, thank you for watching the video till here. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again.